How do you react when your own child tells you it is not safe to go back to your own house? I had just hugged my wife goodbye at the airport when my 8-year-old leaned forward in the back seat and whispered that his mom was planning something bad for us. 10 minutes later, hiding in a parking lot with the engine still running, I opened our home camera app and froze at what I saw. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Michael Carter, and people usually forget I am in the room. I am 42 years old, a senior systems engineer at a data center. I work with machines that do the same thing every day. They follow rules, they never pretend to be one thing in public and another thing in private. I used to think that was boring. Now I think it is peaceful. That morning started like many others, with me playing the safe driver. I loaded my wife's suitcase into the trunk of our silver sedan. It was one of those hard-shell suitcases with stickers from cities I had never seen. She liked it because it looked good in photos. I checked the straps on Leo's booster seat twice, even though he is 8 now and says he is too grown up for all that. Nina came out of the townhouse last. She was on a call already, one hand holding the phone, the other fixing her hair in the reflection of the car window. She did not look at me when she climbed into the passenger seat. She only gave a small wave to her younger sister Emma, who stood on the porch in an oversized hoodie, sipping coffee from our mug. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb. Nina's voice filled the car, but not because she was talking to us. It was her work voice, bright and busy. She was speaking to Jason, her coworker. I could tell by the way she laughed. She had a different laugh for him. She said that traffic would be bad, but she did not mind because I was driving. She said I was the safe option. She said this in a light way, like a joke. I heard Jason laugh through the speaker. Then she called him the star of the show for the event they were planning. She said he had real energy, and that made all the difference. I kept my eyes on the road and my hands at 10 and 2. I do not like to talk while I drive. I like to plan the route and stay in my lane. It calms me. I looked in the rearview mirror. Leo was in the back, staring out of his window. His face was quiet. He has a calm face like mine, but his eyes were sharp. They moved from the road to his mother and back again. He understood more than people thought he did. Nina ended the call after a while. She did not say goodbye to Jason the way she spoke to me. With me, her voice was short, practical. With him, it had a soft edge. She opened a group chat on her phone. I knew the shape of the icons. It was her work friends. I saw the small flashes of light as messages came in and went out. Little bursts of approval, inside jokes I was not part of. She told me that I should try not to miss the exit this time. She reminded me that last time we almost had to circle the airport. I had not forgotten, but I said nothing. I just put on the turn signal in plenty of time and took the right lane. It was not always like this. There was a time when she would hold my hand on the way to the airport. There was a time when she was nervous about flying and asked me to wait in the parking lot until her flight took off so she could text me from the gate. Now she did not seem nervous about anything. As we drove, my mind slipped back to a night a few months earlier at a hotel bar where Nina had arranged an event. She had insisted that I come. She said it would be nice to see where she spent her evenings. I had put on my best shirt and ironed it twice. When we arrived, the lobby was full of people in good clothes, holding small drinks and talking in groups. Nina moved between them like she was born to be there. She introduced me to a few people. She told them I worked with servers and safety. Then she turned right back to Jason and the others. They started to talk about lights and sound and brand image. I tried to follow the words, but they did not need me. At one point, a new vendor joined the group and asked who I was. Nina said I was her tech support at home. She said it in a bright tone, like a funny line. Everyone laughed politely. Jason smiled and clinked his glass against hers. I stood there holding her bag and jacket, feeling like part of the furniture. That memory sat somewhere under my ribs as I pulled up to the airport drop-off lane. The airport was busy, cars lined up, people hurried in and out of sliding doors, wheels of suitcases clicked over the concrete. I pulled into a free space near the departure hall and put the car in park. Nina checked her reflection in the window again. Then she told me to get her suitcase from the trunk. She asked Leo to hand her the small travel bag at his feet. She did not look at him when she spoke. Her eyes were on her phone screen again. I lifted the suitcase out and set it on the curb. I always make sure the handle is locked in place before I let go. It is a small habit, but it makes things smoother. Nina checked the time and frowned. She said the line at security would be long. She said she had to hurry. She gave Leo a quick touch on the head. She did not hug him properly. She gave me a quick brush on the arm that could almost be a hug if someone watched from far away. It felt like it was for show more than for us. She told me to keep my phone close in case she needed something at home. Then she took the handle of the suitcase and rushed toward the sliding doors. The doors opened and closed around her like she was being taken into another world. For a moment, the car felt very quiet. I looked back at Leo. His face was still turned toward the doors his mother had just passed through. I asked if he was hungry. He nodded. His eyes did not leave the building. I drove to the short-term parking lot and found a space. We walked into the airport together and found a small coffee corner with a few chairs near a window. I bought Leo a chocolate milk and a muffin. I took a plain coffee for myself. We sat there for a few minutes. Announcements played over the speakers. People rushed past with their bags. On the other side of the glass, planes moved slowly, like heavy birds. Leo stirred his drink with a small straw again and again. He took small bites of the muffin, but did not look at it. He was thinking hard. He asked when we were going home. I said we would finish our drinks and then drive back, just the two of us. I tried to make my voice sound light, like this was a treat. He looked up at me then. His eyes were a little too serious for an 8-year-old. He told me that he did not want to go home. He said it very quietly. His hands stayed on the table. I asked him why. I kept my voice calm. I did not want to scare him. He told me he had heard something the night before. He had gotten up to get water and had heard his mother and Aunt Emma in the kitchen. He said they did not know he was there. He had heard his name and my name. He had heard his mother say that it would be better when I was not living with them. He had heard Emma say that everyone would believe their story. He had heard the word plan. He looked at me like he was scared to say too much, like he was afraid he would get someone in trouble. I could see his throat move as he swallowed. I felt something cold and heavy settle in my chest. I knew Nina had been distant. I knew she had grown closer to Jason and to her work. I knew Emma treated our home like her own, but I had not let myself think that they would sit and design a story together. I kept my tone even. I told Leo that I heard him. I told him it was good he told me. I did not tell him that my hands had started to feel numb. I looked at my watch. Nina's flight would not leave for another hour. I knew that she could still be anywhere in the terminal. I knew she would not be thinking about us anymore. Her mind would be on the event and on the people waiting for her on the other side. I made a decision in a small, quiet way. It did not feel dramatic. It felt like changing a setting on one of my servers. I told Leo we were going back to the car. I used a normal tone, like nothing had changed. We walked out of the terminal, past the long row of cars and taxis. The air outside was cool against my face. We drove out of the parking lot, but I did not take the main road that led straight home. Instead, I turned toward a gas station a few minutes away. My hands knew the route. I had filled up there many times. I pulled into a space near the side of the building, away from the pumps. I turned off the engine, but I left the power on so my phone could connect to the car screen. Leo watched me. He asked if something was wrong. I said we were taking a small break. I tried to smile. I opened the home camera app on my phone. There were several feeds from inside and outside the townhouse. I had installed them for simple reasons at first. I liked to check if I had locked the door. I liked to see when packages arrived. Nina had called them my little toys. She said I liked to watch the house more than I watched the world. The app showed a still image for a second as it loaded the live feed. Then the picture moved. I tapped the front porch camera first. The wide angle showed our small lawn and the street in front of the townhouse. For a moment, everything looked normal. The porch was empty. The door was closed. The sky over the houses was a pale gray, like it often is on travel days. Then, as I watched, a dark car turned the corner and rolled to a stop right in front of our house. Blue and red lights flashed on its roof. I frowned. I checked the time at the corner of the screen. It was 10 minutes since we had left the airport parking lot. Another vehicle pulled up behind the first one. This one was white with simple markings. Both sets of lights flashed in the morning light. My phone vibrated at the same time. A new call came in. The screen showed an unknown local number. Under it, there was a small label from my caller ID app. Police Department. I stared at the phone, at the flashing lights on the camera feed, and at the word police on the screen. For a moment, it felt like the world had gone very quiet, even though my heart was beating fast in my chest. The phone kept vibrating in my hand. The camera feed showed the two vehicles parked at the curb in front of my house. One police car, one ambulance. Blue and red lights moved across the white paint of our front door. For a moment, I did nothing. I just watched. I knew I should answer, but my thumb would not move. It was like the part of my brain that always reacts first had taken a step back. Another part had to take over, the slower part that checks details. I let the call ring out. The sound stopped and the car became very quiet again. Only Leo's breathing and the faint hum of the air conditioning filled the space. My own heartbeat was loud in my ears. Leo asked who it was. I told him it was a wrong number. I did not lie often to my son, but I did not want him to hear the word that had just been on the screen. I watched the front porch feed a little longer. 2 officers stepped out of the car. They walked up the path to our front door. One of them rang the bell. After a few seconds, the door opened. Emma appeared in the frame. Her shoulders were hunched. She had one hand on the doorframe like she needed support. Then the image froze for a moment as the signal lagged. When it caught up, the officers were already inside. The door stood open. The blue and red lights still reflected on the windows. I closed the app. I told myself that maybe there had been a mistake. Maybe someone had seen something strange on the street. Maybe it had nothing to do with me. That is how I think. I try to test the simple reasons first, but Leo's words from the coffee corner were still in my ears. He had heard the word plan. He had heard them talk about people believing them. I took a slow breath. I put the phone face down in the cup holder. Then I turned in my seat to look at Leo. He was watching me closely. His eyes were wide, but he was not crying. He is like me in that way. His fear goes quiet, not loud. I told him that we were going to stay in the car for a few minutes. I told him that sometimes people make mistakes, and sometimes people say things that are not true, but records and facts still matter. I said it mostly for myself, but I saw him nod. As I looked at his small, serious face, my mind pulled me backward to the years that had led us to this point. I remembered when Nina and I first stood in front of the townhouse. Back then, it was just a listing on a website, a few small pictures with a blue sky and a tree that looked too green to be real. I had put together the down payment by saving from my first job and from a small inheritance from my grandfather. I had gone over the numbers on my laptop again and again until I was sure I could manage the monthly payments. Nina had walked through the empty rooms with bright eyes. She had talked about paint colors and parties. She had said this would be our fresh start. She had not asked who would pay which bill. She trusted that the details would just work out. When we signed the papers, my name went on the title, not because I wanted it that way, but because the money came from my side. The lawyer said it was simpler. Nina did not care at the time. She kissed me outside the office and said I was the stable one, and she loved that. Those words used to feel warm. Later, they felt like something else. After Leo was born, things changed slowly. Nina finished her degree and moved into corporate event planning. She liked the rush and the lights. She liked the feeling of being in charge. I went back to my routine at the data center. My job is not exciting when people describe it at parties. I watch systems, set up backups, and write procedures for what to do when something fails. I read policy documents for fun because I like knowing how things fit together. At first, Nina said she was proud that I did something important, even if people did not see it. But once her career started to grow, her tone shifted. At company dinners, she started to introduce me in a different way. She would tell people that I worked with machines somewhere across town. She would say that I knew everything about cables and warnings, like I was part of the building. Then she would quickly move the conversation back to guest lists and themes. I remember one dinner in detail. It was at that same hotel bar I thought of in the car. The place was all glass and metal, with soft light and slow music. Nina stood in a circle of colleagues. Jason was there too, smiling in that easy way of his. When I walked up, she put a hand on my arm and told them that I was her tech support at home. She said I handled the boring stuff so she could shine. The people around her smiled. Someone raised a glass and said that every star needed a backstage crew. They meant it as a kind line, I think. But I heard Jason say that not every person had the patience to live like that. He said that some people were just built to be safe. He said that like it was a small joke. People laughed. It was not loud, but it stayed with me. At home, the small jokes continued. If I said we should save more, Nina would tell me that I worried too much. If I was careful with schedules, she would say I was afraid of life. If I did not want to go out on a weeknight because I had an early maintenance window, she would roll her eyes and tell Emma that I lived like an old man already. Emma loved those lines. She would say that Nina deserved more color. She would say that some men got stuck and never grew. She would say it while using my tools, drinking coffee I had bought, sitting on furniture I had built. She was supposed to stay for a few weeks after a hard time at her own place. That was 2 years ago. Her clothes spread from the guest room into the hallway. Her packages started to arrive at our door. She would shrug and say she was still figuring things out. When something broke, she would call my name. She would complain that the internet was slow or the lamp was flickering. She would tell Nina that I needed to come fix it. She never asked, she just expected. I did fix things. It was easier than saying no, and part of me liked the feeling of order returning. Leo watched all of this from the edge of rooms. He saw his mother rush out to dinners and trips. He saw his aunt sitting on our sofa with her feet up. He saw me move around like a quiet service belt, carrying plates and cables. There were times when Nina treated me well in front of others. She would tell her parents that I was reliable. She would say that I never made a scene, but even that became another way to set me apart. At a family dinner not long before the airport day, she told her parents that I would never take a big leap. She said it with a little laugh. Her mother nodded and said Nina needed someone who could keep up with her speed. Nina did not say I already had kept up, that I had carried the house and the bills when she was still finding her path. She just smiled and squeezed my hand under the table like she was asking me to play along. I did. Leo sat across from us, pushing peas around his plate, listening. Sometimes late at night, when Nina was out at an event and Leo was asleep, I would sit at the small desk in the living room and look at our budget. I would go over the mortgage, the savings, Leo's school fund. I would check log files from work on my laptop. I liked the feeling that numbers and records did not talk behind my back. They just were. When Nina's trips grew more frequent, she stopped checking in the way she used to. The messages became shorter. When I asked how her day had been, she would answer with a picture of a stage or a crowd and say that it was busy. When she came home, she would be full of stories about clients and coworkers. She would mention Jason often. She said he was good at handling pressure. She said he understood her pace. She said she appreciated someone who did not slow her down. When she said that, she did not look at me. She would be looking at her phone, scrolling through pictures, planning the next event. I am not blind. I saw how she started to dress more carefully for work days when Jason would be there. I saw how she checked her reflection twice when he was on his way to pick her up for a planning session. I saw how Emma watched all this with a small smile, as if she was waiting for a show. Still, I told myself they were just colleagues. I told myself I could take jokes, that a few words did not change the structure of our life. I had a house in my name, a steady job, a son who hugged me when I tucked him in at night. It felt solid. Sitting in the car at the gas station with the camera app closed and my phone face down, that feeling of solid ground started to slip. I picked up the phone again, this time to check the call log. The unknown number had left a voicemail. My caller ID app still showed the label from the local police. I did not play the message right away. Instead, I looked at Leo. He was still watching me. I told him I was going to listen to something for a moment. I asked if he wanted to put on his headphones and play a game on the tablet. He said yes, but he did not look excited. He knew something serious was happening. Once his headphones were on, I held the phone close to my ear and played the voicemail. A calm voice explained that officers had responded to a call at my address. The caller had reported a disturbance and concern about safety. The voice said they did not find anyone at the scene who matched my description. They asked me to call back as soon as possible to confirm my location. The message ended. I sat there, very still, a disturbance. Concerns about safety. My description. Someone had used my name and my house in a story, and the story had already reached strangers in uniform. I looked at Leo. He had taken off one side of his headphones and was listening too. Of course he was. Kids always hear more than we think. He asked if the police believed that I had done something bad. His voice was small, but the words were sharp. They cut through my last layer of denial. He asked if they now thought I was dangerous because of what his mom was saying. I took a slow breath before I answered him. I told Leo that the police did not know the whole story yet. I said they had only heard what one person told them on the phone. I reminded him that in my work, we never trust one report without checking the logs and records. I said people could say many things, but records stayed the same. He nodded, but his eyes were still worried. He asked if we were going home now. I looked out through the windshield at the gray sky over the gas station. The path to our house was clear in my mind. I knew every turn. I could almost feel the steering wheel move under my hands. For a second, habit tried to pull me there. Then I pictured the police car in front of our door. I pictured Emma at the entrance, talking to officers. I pictured the word disturbance on a report with my name linked to it. I decided. I told Leo we were not going home yet. I told him there had been some confusion and I needed to clear it up before we went back. I did not tell him that I no longer trusted what might be waiting for us inside those walls. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he asked where we would go. I told him we would find a place to stay for a night or two. I tried to make it sound like a fun trip. I said we could pretend it was a small vacation, just for us. He asked if his mother knew. That question hurt more than I expected. I told him she did not, but that it was okay. I said sometimes grown-ups needed space to think. I put the car in gear and pulled out of the gas station. I did not head toward our neighborhood. Instead, I turned onto the highway and followed signs for the next town over. There was a strip of old shops and low buildings I knew from years of driving past. I remembered seeing a budget motel sign there. As we drove, I called our neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. I put the call on speaker so Leo could hear I was not hiding anything from him. Her voice was careful when she picked up. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine and that Leo was with me. Then I asked her what she had seen outside our house. She said that a police car and an ambulance had arrived. She had watched from her front window. Emma had met them at the door. Mrs. Jenkins said Emma looked shaken, but she had walked out to the officers on her own. There was no sign of any struggle. No one else went inside. Mrs. Jenkins said she had heard Emma raising her voice after the officers left, talking about how something needed to be done before it was too late. She had not heard my name, but she had guessed. Then she told me something that made my skin prickle. She said that when Emma first stepped onto the porch to meet the officers, she glanced up at the corner where my door camera was. Just for a second, like she was checking if it was on. I thanked Mrs. Jenkins. I told her we were staying away from the house for now, and that Leo was safe. I asked her not to share that with anyone unless someone official asked. She said she understood. Her voice had a kind firmness that made me feel slightly less alone. I ended the call and drove in silence for a while. Leo watched the road. He did not ask questions. He knew that sometimes I needed to think without talking. We reached the older part of the next town. The motel was easy to find. It had a simple sign and 2 rows of doors facing a small parking lot. The paint was faded in places, but the grounds were clean. I parked near the office. The air smelled of exhaust and distant fried food. I checked my wallet twice before I went inside. There was something strange about standing at that small counter, asking for a room in the middle of the day with my son sitting in the car outside. It felt like stepping out of my usual life into a side road. The man behind the counter barely looked up. He slid a clipboard across to me. I filled in my name and signed. I paid for 2 nights in cash and 1 on my card. I asked for a room away from the main road if possible. He handed me a key card and told me the number. His eyes did not ask questions, and I was grateful for that. Back at the car, I told Leo we had a small adventure planned. I called it a father-son camp to make him smile. He gave a small half-smile. It was not full, but it was something. We carried our small bags into the room. It was simple but clean. 2 beds, a small desk, a chair, a television mounted on the wall, a window that looked out on the side lot instead of the street. Leo threw himself onto one of the beds and bounced a little. The comforter made a soft rustling sound. He asked if there would be cartoons. I said yes, but first I needed to set up my laptop. I sat at the desk and opened it. The familiar glow of the screen felt like home in a way the room did not. I connected my phone and copied the latest camera clips over. The progress bar crawled across the screen. Leo turned on the television and found a channel with old cartoons. Their high voices filled the room, but I barely heard them. My attention was on the recordings. I opened the first clip from that morning, the front porch just before we left. The street was quiet. Emma stepped out for a moment to check the mail, then went back inside. Nothing strange. The next clip was from later. It showed Emma walking up the path again with a small bag in her hand. She looked up directly at the camera. Her face was blank for a second. Then she went in. I skipped forward. A timestamp showed the minutes passing. The image stayed still. Then, suddenly, there was motion again. A cabinet door swung into view on the edge of the frame. It was open wider than usual. Something fell with a dull sound. I heard what might have been a chair leg scraping. Emma ran back to the door and flung it open. She stepped onto the porch, pressed her back to the door frame, and looked out with wide eyes. She pulled her phone from her pocket with shaking hands. The audio was not perfect, but I could hear some of her words. She said she was scared. She said there had been shouting. She said she did not know where I was. I looked at the timestamp. I compared it to the receipt in my email from the airport parking. We had been paying for our coffee when she said those words. That simple fact settled over me like a weight. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not someone getting carried away with worry. This was a scene. I leaned back in the motel chair and stared at the pause icon on the screen. Leo's cartoon voices buzzed in the background like static. I thought about all the times I had let small things slide, the jokes, the eye rolls, the moments when Nina and Emma reshaped the story of our life in front of others, and I had chosen to stay quiet. I had told myself that staying calm was my strength. Now I could see how that silence had given them space. Space to imagine that they could shape anything, even the way the world saw me as a father. I felt something change inside me, but it was not loud. It was not a burst of anger. It was more like when you flip a switch on a server from one setting to another. The light does not change much, but the behavior does. I decided I would not just sit and hope this passed. I would not walk into the story they were writing for me. I closed the video and opened a new folder on my desktop. I did not give it an emotional name. I called it House Records A. I dragged the clips into it. I added screenshots of my parking receipt and our airport entry time. I took a picture of Leo's ticket from the coffee shop with my phone and sent it to the same folder. Then I pulled a small USB drive from my bag. It was one of the good ones I used for backups at work. I liked it because it had a small metal loop, so you could attach it to a key ring. It made losing it less likely. I plugged it into the side of the laptop. A small window popped up, asking what I wanted to do. I chose to open it and then copied the House Records A folder over. As the files moved, a line of text appeared, showing the number of items and the time left. It was all normal. It was simple. But to me, it felt like a new part of my life was being created, one where I did not just hold facts in my head. I would hold them in ways other people had to respect. When the transfer finished, I ejected the drive safely. Old habits. Then I sat there for a moment, holding it between my fingers. It was a tiny thing, smaller than my thumb, but inside it now was proof that my house had been empty of me when Emma told officers a different story. I needed advice from someone who understood records and systems the way I did, but who also understood how the outside world worked around them. I thought of Priya. She had been my colleague for 6 years. She worked in compliance. She knew policy like other people knew songs. She also knew me. She had seen how I stayed calm when others panicked. She had told me more than once that I let people take advantage of that. I picked up my phone and stepped into the small bathroom so Leo would not hear everything. I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. She asked if everything was okay. I told her that I was safe and Leo was safe, but that someone close to me was telling a very wrong story. I asked if she had a few minutes. I did not give every detail. I did not talk about feelings. I stuck to facts. I told her that someone had called police to my house while I was at the airport. I told her that my cameras showed one person staging noise and then acting frightened. I told her about Leo's warning. She was silent for a moment. Then she asked what I had already saved. When I told her, she sounded relieved. She reminded me of something we both knew from work. When there is a dispute between stories, the person with the clear timeline and the original records usually stands stronger. She told me to keep everything I had in at least 2 places. She told me not to change or edit anything. She told me to write down what I remembered while it was still fresh. She also said something that stuck with me. She said that people like me, the calm ones, often wait too long to act. We think we are being fair, but really we are just giving others more room to move us around. She said there was a difference between staying calm and staying passive. When I ended the call, I knew she was right. I sat back down at the desk. Leo looked over. I smiled at him and pointed to the cartoons, telling him I just had some boring work things to do. Then I opened a simple text file and started to type out the timeline of the day. Times, places, who said what Leo had told me, what I had seen on the cameras. I did not know yet exactly how I would use it. I did not know how long this would take. But I knew one thing. I was done playing the part of the quiet background in other people's scenes. On the desk next to my laptop, the small USB drive lay on a folded motel notepad, its metal loop catching the light from the window. The next morning, the motel room smelled like coffee and old air. Sunlight pushed through the thin curtains in stripes. Leo slept late, curled up with the blanket over his head. I watched him breathe for a while. My phone lay face down on the nightstand. I did not want to look, but I knew I had to. There were several missed calls, one from the same local police number, one from Nina, one from an unknown number with an office code at the start. No messages from Nina, only 2 short texts from her. The first said she hoped we got home fine. The second said she needed to talk later about what happened. Nothing more. I answered none of them. Not yet. Instead, I opened the camera app again. The street outside our house was quiet now. No police car, no ambulance. Emma's car was still in the driveway. Our trash can was crooked by the curb. The scene looked normal again, like nothing strange had happened. I knew better. I dressed quietly and woke Leo. I told him we were going to see a friend of mine later. I said she was good at solving puzzles. That part was true. On the way out, I checked out at the motel office for one of the nights. I told the man we might stay another. He shrugged and said that was fine. We drove to a small coffee place near my office. I bought Leo a warm drink and a bagel. I sent a short message to my manager, saying that I had a family situation and would be late. He replied with a simple, "Okay, hope all is well." After that, I called Priya. She told us to come to her apartment. It was not far from the data center. She sounded awake and steady. When we arrived, she opened the door in simple clothes, hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked like she did on busy project days when she needed her full mind for the work. Leo stood close to me. Priya bent down a little and smiled at him. She had met him once before at a company picnic. She reminded him of that day. He relaxed a bit and went to sit on her sofa with his drink. I sat at her small dining table and opened my laptop. The USB drive felt heavy in my pocket. I placed it on the table between us. I told her the full story now. The airport, Leo's words, the camera clips, the police voicemail, Emma looking up at the camera like she was checking a light. Priya listened without interrupting. That is one of the reasons I trust her. When I finished, she took a breath and started asking practical questions. She wanted to know exact times, where I had been, who could confirm it, what records already existed, parking receipts, work logs, camera timestamps, school sign-ins. She spoke like we were preparing an internal review at the data center. It calmed me. We went through my email and my phone, we checked my calendar, we checked my work login history. She pointed out small details I might have missed, like the security system's automatic alerts. She reminded me that even the router at home kept basic connection records. Right now, she said, they are building a story with feelings. You need to build a story with times. I nodded. She asked what my plan was. I told her I did not have one yet. I only knew that going home without understanding the police visit would be unwise. She agreed. She told me I needed legal advice from someone who lived on the outside of policy, not just inside corporate rules. She recommended a family lawyer her cousin had used once. His name was Samuel Blake. She said he had a small practice downtown, but a good mind. She wrote his name and number on a small sticky note and slid it across the table to me like it was an access code. I put it in my wallet next to my ID. Before we left, she did one more thing. She opened her own laptop and showed me how to back up my files to a cloud account under a fresh password. Now the camera clips and my written timeline existed in 3 places: my laptop, the USB drive, and the cloud. That made me feel steadier than any speech could. On the way out, Leo stopped by her bookshelf. He picked up a small glass paperweight in the shape of a cube. Inside it was a little metal maze. He turned it in his hands. Priya told him it was a puzzle cube. She said that sometimes the way out was not straight, but there was still a clear path if you took your time. Leo nodded. I could see her trying to give him something firm to hold in his mind. After we said goodbye, I sat in the car for a moment and stared at Samuel's number. Then I called. A calm receptionist answered and asked a few basic questions. I told her I needed to speak to Mr. Blake about a family matter and that it involved police being called to my home while I was not there. She said there was a free slot that afternoon for a short consult. I said I would take it. Thorough. Before that meeting, there was one more person I needed to speak to. Leo still had a school day. I did not want him to miss it if I could help it. I also did not want him to carry this alone, so I drove to his school. On the way, I explained that I might talk to the school counselor. I told him counselors were there to help kids when things felt big. He looked uncertain, but he did not argue. He is like me in that way, too. He tries to avoid making trouble. At the school office, I asked if the counselor had time to see us. The receptionist looked at the schedule and said yes, if we could wait 15 minutes. We sat on the small bench outside the counselor's door. Student art covered the walls, bright colors, simple faces. When the counselor, Ms. Flores, came out, she smiled at Leo and at me. She led us into her office. It had soft chairs, a small table, some toys, and a shelf of books with simple titles about feelings. I told her there was tension at home. I said there had been a police visit to our address and that my son had heard adults planning something that confused him. I did not give names. I did not speak badly of Nina. I just said that Leo might be hearing things he did not understand and that I wanted him to have a safe place to talk. Ms. Flores asked Leo if he would like to tell her what he had heard. She said I could stay or wait outside. I asked Leo what he wanted. He looked at me, then at her. He said he could talk to her alone. So I sat in the hallway on the bench. Time moved slowly. Children's voices drifted from classrooms. I stared at a drawing of a bright yellow sun on the wall and focused on my breathing. After a while, Ms. Flores opened the door again and invited me back in. She did not share everything Leo had said, and I did not ask. She said she would write a short note in his file that he felt safe with his father and worried about a story his mother and aunt were talking about. She said she would be available if the court or child services ever needed to speak with her. The simple fact that she used the word court without me saying it first made something in my chest tighten. It meant this path was not only in my head, it was visible from outside. I thanked her. Leo hugged me when we left her office. His arms were tight for a moment, then he stepped back and put on his backpack. I took him to class and spoke briefly with his teacher at the door. I told her Leo might be a bit distracted. I did not go into detail. Teachers already carry enough. Then I drove downtown to my own office. I did not plan to work a full day, but I needed to talk to my manager in person and collect a few things. The data center floor hummed with the usual quiet noise of machines. Fans, servers, the low murmur of people. My manager, Carl, looked surprised to see me. I told him, in simple terms, that there was a family dispute and that my name might appear in some reports. I said I wanted him to hear that from me first, and that my work performance and schedule had been steady. He nodded. He said he had never had a problem with my work. He said he would be willing to write a basic letter about my reliability if needed. He did not ask for details. That respect meant more than he knew. In a small glass meeting room, I printed out my last few performance reviews and a summary of my work schedule. I put them in a folder. I also wrote down Priya's name and position, in case anyone needed to check what she had seen. Then it was time to see Samuel. His office was on the third floor of an older building downtown. The waiting room was simple: chairs, a small table with magazines, a plant in the corner that looked slightly tired. The receptionist asked me to fill out a short form with my name, address, and basic details. When Samuel came out, he had a kind face lined with age and long hours. He shook my hand and led me into his office. The walls had shelves of books and a few framed certificates. There were no dramatic photos or slogans. That calmed me. He asked me to start from the beginning. So I did. The airport, Leo's warning, the camera footage, the police visit, the voicemail, the motel, Priya's help, the school counselor. He listened with the same focus I had seen from senior engineers during serious incidents at work. When I was finished, he leaned back and folded his hands. He told me that in cases like this, feelings were loud, but records were stronger. He said that if someone was trying to paint me as unsafe, the fact that I had clean police history, steady employment, and evidence of being away from the house during the reported disturbance were all important. He explained how emergency orders worked in our area. He said that Nina could ask for temporary changes to custody or house access if she claimed to be afraid. He also said that the court would not just take her word if the other side came with clear, calm proof. He advised me not to return to the house until he knew what had been filed. He said that if a request for a temporary order had already been made, walking into the house could be turned against me. He told me to keep all communication with Nina short, polite, and in writing where possible. He told me never to raise my voice or argue in person in front of witnesses who could be pulled into her story. Then he said we should act, not just wait. He offered to check with the court system that afternoon to see if anything had been filed in my name. If there was, he would get a copy. If not, he would help me prepare for the possibility. He asked for copies of my camera clips, the voicemail, the school note once it was ready, my work records, and any messages from Nina or Emma that hinted at a plan. I told him I had most of that already backed up. His eyebrows lifted slightly. He said that was a good start. When I left his office, the sky outside was a soft, dull blue. The streets were full of people moving fast. I felt strangely slow in the middle of them, like a different type of system. On the sidewalk, I opened my phone for the first time in a few hours. There were new notifications. Nina had posted several messages on social media. They were not direct, but the meaning was easy to read. She wrote about finally choosing safety and breaking away from someone who held her back. Friends had replied with hearts and words of support. None of them knew what really happened that morning. They only saw her version. There was also a new icon at the top of my email app. A small red dot with a number. I tapped it. At the top of my inbox, a new message waited. The sender line showed a law firm I did not know. The subject line said, Carter, proposed temporary parenting and property arrangements. The subject line sat there in my inbox like a small, neat box with something heavy inside. I tapped it. The email was written in careful, polished language. Nina's lawyer thanked me in advance for my cooperation and said they hoped we could handle things in a calm way. Then the message laid out their proposal. They suggested that Nina be given temporary full custody of Leo until things stabilized. They suggested that I move out of the townhouse at once so Nina and Leo could feel secure. They suggested that I continue to pay the mortgage and other household costs for continuity. They suggested that my time with Leo be limited to short daytime visits at public places to be scheduled at Nina's discretion. There were words about safety, stability, and concern. There were no words about the camera clips, my absence from the house, or the fact that the so-called disturbance had been staged after I left. I read the email twice. My heart sped up at the edges, like it wanted to run, but the center of me stayed very still. This was the story Nina wanted to make real. This was the shape she and Emma had been practicing in the kitchen while Leo got a glass of water. I did not reply. I forwarded the email to Samuel instead with a simple line. Just received this. Then I put the phone back in my pocket and walked slowly to my car. On the drive back to the motel, I let my mind run through the pieces I already had. Camera clips, police voicemail, Leo's words, Mrs. Jenkins' observation, Priya's help with logs, Ms. Flores's note, my work history. Now this email that laid out clearly what Nina wanted to take. By the time I opened the door to our motel room, a shape was forming in my head. Not a full plan yet, but a direction. Leo was sitting on the bed with his notebook open. He had been drawing. When he saw me, he held up the page. It was a sketch of a little house on a hill with 2 stick figures in front, holding hands. There was a third smaller figure off to the side near a car, looking away. I told him it was a good drawing. My voice sounded rough to my own ears. I sat down on the other bed and told him that some people wanted to change how we lived, but that I was going to do everything I could to keep us safe in the right way. I told him I would not disappear from his life. I needed him to hear that. He asked if we were still going home. I said we would, but not until some things were clear and written down. Later that evening, Samuel called. He had managed to check the court system. He told me that Nina had already filed for an emergency hearing. She claimed in her request that she was afraid of me, that there had been a serious disturbance at the house, and that Leo needed protection. He said the hearing date was set for the following week. He said we would have time to prepare, but not much. He suggested that we meet again as soon as possible. When I ended the call, I sat at the motel desk with my notebook open. I thought about the way Nina moved through her world. She liked big moments, announcements, dramatic changes. She believed that if she spoke with enough certainty, people would believe her. They always had. I could not fight that with more words alone. I had to use something she did not pay much attention to: systems, rules, and quiet facts that sit in files. The next morning, I dropped Leo at school again. I told him I would pick him up myself at the end of the day. I did not say why that promise mattered so much to me. Then I drove to the bank. The bank branch was cool and quiet inside. People waited in soft chairs, looking at their phones or at nothing at all. A woman at a desk asked how she could help. I told her I needed to review my accounts and make some updates for family reasons. We sat together in a small cubicle with a glass wall. She pulled up my accounts on her screen. I asked about the mortgage, the savings, and Leo's education fund. I asked which ones had my name alone, which ones had Nina's, and what the rules were for each. The woman explained patiently. The house loan had always been in my name. The savings were in an account that I alone could move. The education fund had both our names, but any changes required both signatures. I listened carefully. Then I told her I wanted to move part of my savings into a new account in my name only, with no online access set up yet. I said I wanted the education fund marked so that no withdrawals could be made without both parents present. All of this was within the rules. I was not hiding anything. I was simply making sure that no one could drain what was meant for Leo while claiming to act for his safety. The woman printed out forms and slid them to me. I read every line before I signed. It is a habit from my work. I do not sign what I do not understand. At one point, she asked if everything was okay at home. She said it in a gentle tone. I said there were some disagreements, but that I believed in clear records. She nodded like she understood more than she said. When I left the bank, the sun was higher. The day had the feeling of a system booting up for a major change. From there, I went back to the data center for a short meeting with Carl. I gave him more detail this time. I told him there was going to be a hearing where my role as a father and homeowner might be questioned. I said that if someone called him, all I wanted him to be able to say was that I had been steady and reliable at work. He listened and said he had never seen me raise my voice or act in a way that worried him. He said he would write a basic letter for anyone who asked, and that he would stick to facts about my employment. I thanked him. I knew that a neutral, solid voice from my workplace could matter later. I also printed a fresh copy of my performance reviews and a letter from Human Resources confirming my years of service and usual schedule. I put them in the growing folder in my bag. That afternoon, I met Samuel again. He had already read Nina's lawyer's email and the court filing. He laid them out on his desk like two sides of a map. He pointed to the parts that were based on pure statements and the parts that could be tested against records. He said that in his experience, judges did not like hearing two people simply argue about who felt more afraid. They liked to see who could show, calmly, where they were and what they were doing when something was supposed to have happened. We went through my timeline once more. He asked me to be very precise about times. When we left the house, when we arrived at the airport, when Nina walked into the terminal, when Leo told me about the plan, when I saw the police cars on the camera, when I got the voicemail. He circled each timestamp on a printed page and wrote next to it what record we had to support it: parking ticket, camera file name, phone log, voicemail, neighbor's statement. He made a list of the other people who could help: Priya as a witness to my calm behavior and to the records we pulled, Ms. Flores with her note about Leo's sense of safety, Mrs. Jenkins as someone who saw Emma's actions, Carl as my manager. He said we might not need all of them to speak, but their written statements and notes could still go into the file. He also asked about the house title. When I told him it had been bought in my name before the marriage, he nodded slowly. He said that did not mean Nina had no rights at all, but it did mean she could not simply push me out and take full control based on a sudden claim. He warned me again not to contact Nina directly except by text or email, and only when necessary. He told me not to argue with her relatives online or in person. He said any loud, emotional moment could be twisted to fit her story. Then he began to draft our reply for the court. He wrote it in clear, plain language. He did not attack Nina's character. Instead, he pointed out contradictions between her claims and the records. He stated that I had never had any issue with the law, that I had a steady job, that I had been Leo's daily caregiver many times when Nina was away. He asked the court to keep Leo's routine stable with me while we sorted out the truth. He also requested that the court take a close look at the police report and the timing of the call compared to my location. He did not accuse Emma of anything directly. He just asked that the court consider the possibility that the call had been misleading. When he finished, he slid the draft across the desk for me to read. I looked over every line. It felt strange to see my life turned into paragraphs and numbered items, but it also felt right that, for once, the words were lined up in a way I recognized. I signed where he asked me to sign. He said he would file the documents the next day. From that moment, the path to the hearing felt fixed. The days leading up to it moved both quickly and slowly at the same time. Leo stayed at the motel with me at night and went to school during the day. I tried to keep his routines as normal as possible. We did homework at the small motel desk. We ate simple dinners. We watched cartoons. There were messages from Nina asking when I would bring Leo home, saying it was not fair to keep him from his normal house. I answered only that there were legal steps in motion and that I would follow what the court decided. I did not explain my reasons. I did not accuse her. I did not give her any words she could twist. There were more posts on her social media, full of vague lines about breaking free from someone who hid behind rules and controlled everything quietly. People liked and commented. None of that went near a judge's file. It only strengthened my belief that I was choosing the right arena. On the day of the hearing, I woke before the alarm. The motel room was dim and still. Leo slept on his side, mouth slightly open. I watched him for a moment, then got dressed in the simplest, neatest clothes I had: clean shirt, dark pants, plain shoes. I packed my folder with care. Inside it were copies of the camera clip summaries, printouts of timelines, letters from work, bank confirmations, the counselor's note, and Samuel's filing. The USB drive was in a small pocket at the front. It felt like a key. I woke Leo gently and explained that we were going to a special office where grown-ups made decisions. I told him I would speak there and that he might not have to. I told him his job was just to stay close to me. We ate a quick breakfast at the motel lobby. The coffee tasted thin, but it was warm. Leo nibbled on a piece of toast, then tucked closer to my side when we walked to the car. The family court building was not big. It sat near the center of town, between a library and a low office block. The front had wide steps and glass doors. People went in and out with files in their hands and worry on their faces. Inside, the lobby had rows of chairs and a desk where visitors checked in. A security guard asked us to place our items on a tray. I put my keys, phone, and folder down carefully. We passed through a metal detector. Everything felt controlled and slow. That suited me. Once we were through, we found seats in the waiting area. The walls were a neutral color. There were signs reminding people to stay quiet and to turn off their phones in hearing rooms. I spotted Nina across the lobby. She stood with Jason and Emma near a potted plant. She wore a fitted blazer and a serious expression. Her lawyer, a tall man in a dark suit, stood beside her, talking and pointing to some papers. They all looked confident, like people who were used to being heard. Nina glanced over and saw me. For a moment, her eyes slid past me, like she had trained herself not to see me as important. Then she noticed Leo holding my hand. Her mouth tightened. She did not call out. She turned back to her lawyer and said something I could not hear, moving her hands in a way that looked like she was explaining a problem with a client. I did not approach them. I sat with Leo, my folder on my lap, my back straight. I focused on my breathing and on the printed case number on the paper Samuel had given me. Time passed in small steps. People went in and came out of side doors. Some looked relieved. Some looked even more tired than before. Samuel arrived a few minutes later. He greeted me with a short nod and a quiet word for Leo. Then he sat beside us and went over the main points once more in a low voice. He reminded me to answer questions simply and to let him handle the arguments. I felt strangely calm. It was the same feeling I had during a major system test at work. All the preparation had already happened. Now it was just time to see how it ran. A door along the far wall opened. A court officer stepped out with a clipboard in hand. The noise in the lobby dipped a little. The officer called out our case name, clear and firm, and gestured toward the open doorway as the hallway behind him went quiet, and the light from the hearing room spilled out across the floor. We followed the officer down the short hallway. The air felt cooler there, like the building itself wanted people to calm down before they spoke. Inside the hearing room, the judge sat at a raised desk. There was a court clerk to one side and a recorder at the other. 2 tables faced the judge. Samuel and I took the one on the right, and Nina, her lawyer, Jason, and Emma sat at the one on the left. Leo sat on a chair behind me, near the wall. I could feel his presence like a small, steady warmth at my back. The judge looked over the file first, then at both tables. She asked Nina's lawyer to start. He stood and spoke with a smooth voice. He said Nina had serious concerns about my temper. He said there had been a frightening disturbance at the house. He said Emma had been there and had feared for her safety. He said Nina had felt forced to leave town for work while worrying what I might do. He painted a picture of a tense, unstable man. I sat there and listened to this version of myself like he was describing a stranger. When he was done, the judge turned to Samuel. Samuel did not raise his voice. He simply asked if he could call me to speak. I went to the small stand, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. He asked me about my job, my daily routine with Leo, my history with the house. I answered in short, clear sentences. Then he asked where I had been on the morning of the disturbance. I told the judge the times. When we left the house, when we parked at the airport, when we sat in the coffee corner, when Leo told me about the plan, when I saw the police car on the camera. Each time, Samuel held up a piece of paper or a printout. Parking receipt, camera still with a timestamp, phone log, the police voicemail record. Then he asked permission to play a short section of camera footage. The judge agreed. On the screen, the porch appeared. Emma walked in calmly. Later, noise inside, then Emma rushing out, looking up at the camera before placing a call. The timestamp showed I was still at the airport then. Next came the airline records, showing Nina had checked in but never boarded the flight, and a still image from airport security of her leaving with Jason. Then the short note from Ms. Flores stating that Leo said he felt safe with me and worried about a story, and Mrs. Jenkins's written observation about Emma's calm arrival and delayed fear. Samuel finished with the property documents and our bank confirmations, showing the house in my name from before the marriage and the protections on Leo's fund. The judge sat very still, reading, eyes moving from one page to another. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured. She said the records did not support Nina's version. She said the attempt to use emergency procedures in this way was serious. She ordered that Leo stay in my primary care. Nina would have limited, supervised time for now. Any change to the house or accounts was denied. She added that parts of this file might be sent on for review, given the concern about a planned false report. On the other side of the room, Nina's shoulders dropped. Emma stared at the table. Jason looked at the door, as if he wanted to be somewhere else. The judge told us the order would be ready in writing shortly. Then she stood and left. The room went quiet, except for the soft scrape of chairs. A court officer handed Samuel a copy of the signed order. Samuel passed it to me. I looked down at the paper for a brief moment, then folded it once and slid it into my folder. I closed the folder with my hand, feeling the firm edge under my palm, while the echo of the judge's decision still hung in the still air of the room.